Hello you, it's me. Today we're going to talk about The City in the Middle of the Night by Charlie Jane Anders. I've seen another Anders book in stores lingering around called All the Birds in the Sky, and that's one I really want to read. But this is the first book of theirs that I've read, and I have mixed feelings about it, so that's what we're going to talk about today. So this is a story set on a planet called January that's tidally locked, which means it doesn't rotate as it goes around the sun. So one side of it is totally scorched to bare rock, and the other side of it is covered in ice. Humans have settled this planet, and there's a very narrow band just where the day meets the night that humans can live. So they've colonized it and built two major cities, both of which exist in essentially perpetual twilight. So the first city, Zeusfant, I think that's how you pronounce it, has built its economy totally around controlling people's sleep cycles. They sleep and they work and they don't do much else, and there's big punishments for sort of breaking that routine. The second city, Argello, doesn't seem to sleep at all. There are no clear time constraints or rules for anything like this, but unlike city number one, Zeusfant, it's ruled by sort of warring families and crime syndicates. So the story centers around two main characters. Sophie, who is exiled from Zeusfant for a crime she didn't commit and sent out into the night. She manages to fake her death, return to the city, and watches her best friend Bianca use her loss as the fire that fuels her, found a political movement to overthrow the government of Zeusfant. And during her exile, she forms a really strange and interesting relationship with the creatures called crocodiles that live on the night side of January. The second character is called Mouth, who is a member of the resourceful couriers that transports goods between these two cities. She's a battle-hardened nomad who is the last of a tribe called the Citizens, and she's desperately trying to learn about her people and keep her culture alive in the face of a world that is rapidly changing. The two characters leave Zeusfant together in the aftermath of a political upheaval that's brought about by Bianca, Sophie's friend. They face trials and dangers on the road to Argello, learning more about each other, and they're forced to sort of weigh up their priorities. Going back to fix the broken city they left in the first place, building a new life in relative safety, fighting to preserve a dying culture, halting the human environmental catastrophe that's affecting this new planet, or building a line of communication to benefit both parties with the creatures that live on the night side of January, whose relationship with the human settlers is actually a lot more complicated than anybody could have guessed. There's quite a bit I want to say about this book, and I'm not really sure of the order it's all going to come out in, so hold on tight, I guess. The first thing I want to say about this book is that the base world building is so phenomenally good. The idea of humans settling another planet but facing so much adversity from their environment, for me, was really reminiscent of Harry Harrison's Death World trilogy, if you've ever read that. The idea of them tracing their heritage as people, not back to Earth, but back to engineering and other various factions that were on the mothership that brought them here. The seeds of the ideas that the author has clearly had about the new types of economy that would build up in these new cities are original. One device the author uses in this story, I think the trope is called call a morpa rabbit, is the idea of Earth words that carry over to a new culture, something's lost in translation, and they end up very much not meaning the same thing. For example, there's a bar scene where they drink lemonade, and it's described as a thick green drink. The creatures on the ice are called crocodiles and bison, but bear absolutely no resemblance to the creatures that originally had those names. And I think one thing that's great about this, honestly, is the lack of sci-fi jargon, which I think puts a lot of people off breaking into the sci-fi genre. So I think that this book, that doesn't have that sci-fi jargon, is a really good gateway book for people that haven't read much sci-fi before. I love the design of the cities. I love the road. I love the way the author built these different environments that felt very unique and felt like different biomes in the same world. I thought the creature design was fantastic, especially with the crocodiles, who are later known as the Gelet. Their physical appearance is revealed really slowly, with more attributes being described through the book. So for a long time, you're having to sort of tweak the image in your head in a similar way to how the Ariakaya are revealed to the reader in China Mieville's Embassy Town, which you should also definitely check out. While all the time having this sort of backdrop thought of what about this in terms of physical description or mannerisms made the original settlers call this a crocodile is very, very interesting. I think that the actual design of the crocodiles themselves makes them feel like they could even be part of Wayne Barlow's expedition, which is a high compliment because Wayne Barlow is one of the best creature designers, full stop. Unfortunately, while the world building is a brilliant start, where this book falls down ultimately is the story, or parts of the story. There were quite a few narratives running at the same time over the course of this book, and honestly, some I just didn't care about. The story with Sophie in contact with the Gelet, really good. The story about Mouth trying to come to terms with being the last of a people and learning to value the living people she has over the people who are gone. I thought that was really good. How these two storylines tied together at the end. Perfect, well crafted. But I thought the book pervasive lines of political upheaval were just really unimportant and unnecessary. So the characters leave one town and frustratingly loads of stuff about that society are just not touched on again, not explained very well. For the second town, Argello, where the characters get involved in gang warfare and try and raise an army to take back to city number 1. The whole second part, bar the very, very finish of the book, felt really unnecessary. And I feel that them going back to Ziasfan lent very, very little to the conclusion of the story. And speaking of the conclusion of the story, it was one of those conclusions that's like, and that's it. Or is it? We'll leave the rest to your imagination. What could possibly happen next? We'll not know in this story. Making the whole of the story I just read feel like a prologue for something else. In fact, I'll go ahead and say that because there was such a good world build, so many amazing seeds of ideas with so much potential, and then so much unnecessary filler story, it felt like Anders had filled a notebook with this incredible idea for a brilliant world, a really good base storyline, and then given it to somebody else who's filled the gaps in with trash. In the sci-fi trope, humans have colonized another planet and we go back and we examine how society has changed over the years they've been there. There really is a scale. At the bottom end of the scale, in absolute trash, you have The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. I cannot stress how pants this book is. And at the opposite end, you have 10 out of 10 gold star, sociologically brilliant sci-fi masterpiece, The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin. And this is like slap bang in the middle with the storyline dragging it one way and the design dragging it the other way, which is really sad because it has so much potential. And while we're relating it to other books, it actually kind of felt similar to Mortal Engines to me by Philip Reeve, but I can't really pinpoint why. So if anybody else got that vibe off it, I'd be interested to know. So while I was being torn in two directions, really, with this book, and I had a lot of love for the environment and the creature design, the characters were probably the thing that annoyed me most. And it felt like over the course of the book, the author really wanted to convey personality shifts in these characters. But these shifts were so sudden and with no apparent trigger event that you're reading from one chapter to the next and you're almost like, wait, why are they being like that now? Bianca, the person that thought Sophie was dead, turns into a psychopath from one page to the next. I can understand why she would have become this eventually, but it was like, yes, she lost her friend, yes, she became embroiled in politics, and I understand that that would have eventually made her a very different person, becoming the thing she swore to fight against, and I feel like that's a really good route to go down, but it was done so not gracefully. They're crossing a body of water at some point in the story, and she's saying to Sophie, legitimately, you faked your death. I thought you were dead. Now you're saying you're back. You want to be with me again. How can I possibly trust you? And the next page, she's literally grabbing her and saying, you're mine. I was like, what? I feel like the intended message was, don't follow people blindly, don't put people on pedestals in your mind when you don't really know who they are, or they're not the same person that they were a long time ago when you knew them. Which is good, but it could have been done miles better. And Sophie, after contacting the Gelet on the night side, starting to understand them, realizing that they're a sentient race, doesn't seem to have any real clear idea of what to do with this information. And it shows not through a fault of Sophie's, but it's like the author didn't know how to really address it. She tells people the Gelet are aware, and some people, as she tells, are like, okay, let's open lines of communication with them. Let's try and start trade relationships that's beneficial to both parties. And she's like, no, you don't understand. They're alive like us. You'll never get it. You didn't go through what I went through. Sort of silently stewing and being angry at how people are ignorant about the Gelet and then refusing to fix the problem for 99% of the book, at the end of which she's sort of forced to fix the problem. So I really didn't like Sophie for most of the book. Mouth was initially a very, very likeable character for me. She was a lone wolf, she's stoic, the only thing she cares about is life on the road, keeping moving. But after she's caught up in the sort of political upheaval in Zeasphan and is forced to leave, she turns into some meek, quake in her boots, trembling little mouse who... And this really made me, like, I was reading it and I was like, psh, come on. She, over the course of a chapter, develops a mental block where she can't pick up a weapon without her hands involuntarily turning to jelly. So somebody hands her a gun and she's like... And again, I understand why this personality shift would have happened eventually. She's had her whole life for this personality shift to happen. Why is it happening now? It felt, like the other two, that there was no proper event that caused the cascade of emotions. To me, it was frustrating because initially they were such well-built characters, and I really wanted to see them grow. It may even have been better if there was a several-year gap in the middle of the book and it picked back up with the characters after an interlude. They were very different, and then it explained through flashbacks to events that happened in the interlude why these personality shifts took place, what has happened. I thought I was a guy who cared more about the story than the characters, but this book is really making me think otherwise. Also, it alternated perspective through this book between Sophie and Mouth. Sophie's chapters were being written in first-person present tense, and Mouth's chapters were written in first-person past tense. And I don't really see why that was done. The only reason I can think of is that there was not enough to differentiate the characters in terms of their voice and their internal monologue, that the writing style had to be changed to make them seem like you weren't reading the same character through the whole book. So I'm going to give this book 3 stars, like a mid to low 3 stars. If it was just on design, I would give this book 5 stars because I really enjoy the design. I hope there are more stories set here. It would be good if this was book 1 of a series that had a slow start and it picked up and developed things more. I'd like that a lot, and maybe on my second read through of book 1, having read more, I'd have different opinions on it. So fingers crossed, there's more in this universe that's going to make me feel better. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll leave my Twitter link below. Follow me on there. More book reviews coming all the time. I read pretty quick. I'm filming a few today. Have you read this? Let me know what you thought. I'd be interested to hear other people's opinions, especially if you really liked it. Tell me what you loved about it. What you're reading at the moment. Comment below. And I'll see you soon.